I don't think they'll ever replace manned aircraft, but they will be a supplement to manned aircraft to fly out in the regions beyond where the manned aircraft fly. So that's a little bit about the National Hurricane Center. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about our local office in Melbourne. The office in Melbourne, we're responsible for 10 counties of East Central Florida, shown on the map in red on the bottom left, the top left. So from Volusia County down to Martin County, the inland past Orlando to Lake County. And these counties are determined by our radar coverage range. Those are the black circles seen on that same diagram. So this is a coverage range of our wind velocity from our Doppler weather radars across the state. And I want to talk about what our office in Melbourne does. What we do in Melbourne for a hurricane is we start with the National Hurricane Center forecast. So the hurricane forecast that you're all seeing on TV and on the internet, that's our starting place as well. We start with that official forecast. We take that forecast, and then as we get closer and closer to the time of landfall, we look closer into the detail of the impacts for county level and sub-county scale impact from the hurricane. So for example, the hurricane is coming in, it's approaching, say, St. Lucie or Martin counties, and we're looking now, what are the impacts going to be from tornadoes, flooding, extreme winds, and storm surge across a particular county, or maybe even part of a county, as the hurricane comes in and begins to make landfall. So let's look at these one by one. First, let's look at the hurricane tornado threat to Florida. We know that the vast majority of tornadoes that occur in association with a hurricane occur in the right front quadrant of that hurricane. So if you just took a clock and you went from noontime to 3 o'clock, that pie shape, that northeastern pie shape, relative to where the center of the hurricane is the quadrant with the most amount of activity for tornadoes. So for that to occur, where would the hurricane center have to be for us to have tornado impact over the peninsula of Florida? Hurricane center would have to be west of us or southwest of us for us to be in that northeastern quadrant. So what I'm showing here on this diagram, these are the center tracks of the hurricane, where the eye of the hurricane was, when multiple tornadoes were occurring across the state, across the peninsula of Florida. In all cases except for one, which is Hurricane David in 1979, straight to the East Coast, all the tornadoes that occurred were when the hurricane was to our west or southwest, placing us in that favorable northeastern quadrant. So the key point to this is, look at, for example, Hurricane Ivan there, and that black line going up toward Mobile Bay. In a situation like Hurricane Ivan, we would have no direct impacts over the peninsula of Florida from the winds of that hurricane, or from the rains of that hurricane, or from the storm surge of that hurricane. So you're going to wake up in the morning, hear about the hurricane heading up towards Mobile, Alabama. There's no watches or warnings in effect in the state of Florida. And the forecast today is partly cloudy, 40% chance of thunderstorms like any typical August day. But the one difference is those thunderstorms could become tornado, and that's in the forecast. Possible tornadoes today. And the tornadoes are going to occur today because that large-scale wind flow, that counterclockwise flow around the hurricane, even though the winds aren't strong, occurs well beyond the central location of the hurricane. So aloft over the peninsula of Florida, our winds may be 40 or 50 miles per hour today. The typical August day, they're probably 10 miles per hour or less. So we get strong winds just above the ground, and that creates a wind shear. And wind shear makes it favorable for tornadoes. So our typical afternoon thunderstorms that may occur in August, any other day of the year, now can become tornadic because of the wind shear caused indirectly by Hurricane Ivan well off the coastline. So just remember that if there's a hurricane over the open Gulf of Mexico moving northward, it's not going to directly impact us over Florida. Think in the back of your mind tornadoes, because it's very possible we could have tornadoes in this particular day. Tropical Storm Faye, rainfall. Here's Tropical Storm Faye from back in 2008. At this time, it's located over the northwestern part of Lake Okeechobee, moving northeast towards Melbourne. You can see the rain bands of the hurricane, and of the tropical storm. And one thing you need to remember is that the strength of a hurricane is not related to the amount of rainfall that you fall from. Some of the weaker tropical storms, even tropical depressions, have produced some of our largest amount of flooding. Some of our strongest hurricanes, like Hurricane Andrew, didn't produce any significant flooding. What you have to be concerned with is the speed of motion of the hurricane. Because the longer the hurricane persists over your area, the more hours of rainfall, and the more accumulation of rainfall. So in this particular case, this is Tropical Storm Faye. It was forecast to move from its position there to Melbourne and offshore of Daytona Beach, and then take a left hook and move back inland up across northwestern Florida. The track was right on, verified very well. The speed of motion was forecast to be about 5 miles per hour, 4 to 5 miles per hour. That worked out really well, with the exception of one thing. The tropical storm stalled. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. The first time it stalled was very near the position I'm showing here, right near Lake Okeechobee. It stalled for 6 hours. So we got an additional 5 hours of rainfall than what we had forecast, because it stalled for 6 hours. It kept moving with the last rainfall. The second time it stalled was just offshore, right about Melbourne point. Stalled for 12 hours. So we get 11 more hours of rainfall than anticipated. And the third time it stalled was just offshore of Daytona Beach. And this time it stalled for 24 hours. So the rainfall added up. We had just under 28 inches of rain accumulated in North Melbourne from this particular storm. The original forecast was 5 to 10 inches of rain. That's a lot of rain. 5 to 10 inches. They had over 2 feet of rain in this one location because of 3 stalls of the hurricane. So even though the track was right, the speed of motion was pretty good, we didn't forecast a stall. When a hurricane stalls, the wind fields are just so marginal that we cannot tell the difference between a hurricane stalling and starting out again and moving at 2, 3, 4 miles an hour again. We just can't diagnose that by looking at weather data. So when it stalls, we don't know how long it's going to stall. We don't know if it's going to stall for an hour or two, and then start moving at 2 or 3 miles an hour again, or is it going to stall for 12 hours, or 18 or 24 hours, and then start moving again. It's just impossible to say given the data we have currently. It's one of our biggest forecast challenges. This was a picture taken 2 blocks from our weather office in Melbourne after the peak of flooding from Tropical Storm Faye. This is the top of an automobile. The person was trying to maneuver around these construction barriers and get to the road in the backside of the image here. He was uninjured. He was embarrassed. He was upset. Lost his car, but he was uninjured. But you can easily envision someone in that situation, maybe panicking or having a child in the car, not being able to get the child in the car quick enough. And these are the situations, and they're rare, but they do happen. We have fatalities from flooding in Florida. We don't usually have flooding fatalities in Florida because we're so flat, we don't have moving water. In this case, the drainage culvert washed out, but you obviously couldn't see beneath this water. And the drainage culvert set up a very weak current of maybe 1 or 2 miles per hour. But all it needed was when that car moved in that area, the vicinity of that washed out culvert, it tapped that little bit of movement of water, and it pushed the car up its wheels and the deepest part of the water. So it can happen in Florida, and once in a while, we have fatality in Florida, just because someone does something they probably should have been doing in the first place. Winds from hurricanes. In this picture here, we're looking at Hurricane Charlie. This is a radar picture of Hurricane Charlie making landfall around Punta Gorda, Fort Myers, as a Category 4. If you look right near the center, right above Fort Myers, you see that bright red area that is called the eye wall. The eye wall of the hurricane is just outside of the eye. The eye is the calmest part of the hurricane. Right inside of the eye wall, you see the blue that's indicating no rainfall falling there. The skies may be partly cloudy at this point in time. But in that red area, in that eye wall, is the most intense part of the hurricane. So if you are to experience the center of a hurricane, you're going to need to go through one part of the eye wall, the eye, and the second part of the eye wall. And the eye wall is the most intense part of the hurricane, so you don't want to be near that eye wall. If you look at this whole picture, across the whole state of Florida, most of the state is getting rainfall. They're being impacted by this hurricane. But the truly devastating or life-threatening conditions from wind are occurring in that small area, that donut, that eye wall, right outside of the eye of the hurricane. So if you were, say, 10 miles outside of that eye wall, that area of red, you may experience wind gusts of 50 or 60 miles per hour. You may lose a shingle or two from your roof at most. A few tree limbs down, maybe a few old trees get knocked over, but no significant damage. But if you're 10 miles away and you're impacted by that eye wall, and that eye wall crosses over the location you're at, you can have devastating conditions. You may lose your entire house. The wind gusts may be 150, 160, 170 miles per hour. And that's what happened as this eye wall moved across in that area. It was devastation, almost like a tornado, a very narrow corridor of extreme damage within about 10 miles of the center of the eye of the hurricane. And outside of that 10-mile corridor, conditions were gusty winds, but not significant damage. That's the gradient of damage, or the scale of damage that can occur in very intense hurricanes. Very localized. So if something like that traveled across Stuart, there could be parts of Stuart, South Stuart, that gets devastated by this hurricane. And you may have a friend, like a radio operator, another friend in another part of the city even, in the north part of Stuart, that says, I don't know what the weather service was talking about for the last 5 days. This wasn't that bad of a storm. It certainly wasn't a major hurricane. It wasn't devastating. And little do you know, the other side of Stuart has devastating conditions with almost complete removal of homes. That happened with Hurricane Andrew back in '92 in Miami. South Miami was devastated. North Miami had a near miss. This is a storm chaser video. So his goal as a storm chaser was to put himself in position at a hotel, a very, very stable, good, and well-built hotel, and have that eyewall of the hurricane travel right over his location so he could videotape it. Do you think he succeeded? Do you think this is Category 4? That's a strong Category 1, borderline Category 2. That's a Category 1. Imagine what Category 4 would be like. These winds are about 85 miles per hour sustained, gusting over 100. Category 4 would be gusting about 180 miles per hour. I mean, not even close. So he missed that maximum area by a few miles. And it just shows, especially in Florida, we have a lot of potential debris to be picked up. We have a lot of carports. We have a lot of pool screen enclosures. We have a lot of this corrugated metal signage around. We have a lot of metal that can get picked up very easily by even a 70 mile an hour wind. Never mind 100 or 160 or 180 miles per hour wind. So most people killed during hurricanes from the wind experience blunt force trauma. They're killed by it from flying debris. It's not the wind itself killing people, it's the debris picked up by the wind killing people. So even for Category 1, there's a tremendous amount of debris that can be out there. So the storm surge historically is the most dangerous of all the 4 impacts from a hurricane because it traps you, it cuts off your evacuation route. So if you decide that maybe you're going to evacuate tomorrow, you're going to get a good night's sleep tonight and evacuate tomorrow morning, and that storm surge comes up before you have a chance to evacuate in the morning, you've lost your opportunity to make that evacuation. And it traps you in that location so that when the winds and the storm surge become worse, you're stuck in that location, you're not able to leave. So most of the coastal evacuations that are set up because they want to get you out of that storm surge zone. It's not from the wind itself. So if you evacuate, if you're in a mobile home or you're in a low-lying area at risk of flooding, you can evacuate. But other than that, you're probably going to stay where you're at if you're in a well-built home. And as a hurricane approaches your area, unless you're in a storm surge zone, then you can evacuate to get out of that storm surge zone. And that's happened many times recently, most recently with Ike in the Houston area, where people looked at the forecast on TV, they saw a major hurricane heading towards them, but they said, hey, it's all over the open Gulf of Mexico. I don't know why emergency management and the weather service is talking about evacuations now. I can do that in the morning. Now, a lot of people stayed on the Barrier Island. We're going to wait till first light to evacuate. They didn't understand why the urgency was to evacuate the night before. People said, well, maybe I'll wait. Maybe in the morning the forecast will change. The hurricane will change direction. I won't need to leave after all. I don't want to make this move unnecessarily. And when they get up in the morning, the water had already cut off their evacuation routes and they couldn't leave. And they had to be rescued by the Coast Guard. So always think ahead when you're thinking storm surge. Always get out of harm's way because your evacuation route may be cut off and you may not be able to change your mind the next day. All right, just to wrap it up here, let's take a look at the current tropical